So welcome to Unleashed Learning TV and Unleashed Learning Radio for our podcast listeners. You know, there's a connection between who you are and how you teach and lead. In fact, if you want to make learning stick for everyone, who you are and the life you're leading matters. So to help you ensure it's a focus, that life of yours is a focus throughout the year, we've brought Dr. Suzy Green back to Unleashed Learning TV. Now, she's a clinical and coaching psychologist. She's the founder and CEO of the Positivity Institute. She's also the author of the Positivity Prescription. She's here to share with us ways to create personal goals that stick for good. And you might want to grab a paper and pen, as this is an interview filled with a lot of wisdom. Here we go. Let's rock and roll. Welcome to Unleashed Learning TV, Suzy Green, Dr. Suzy Green. Welcome back.
Oh, it's so wonderful to be here, William. Thank you.
Suzy, as you know, what we do at Unleashed Learning is we embed a system in businesses and schools and organizations to make learning stick for everyone. And what always comes up is there's a big part of who the teacher or leader is in that system, right? And the connection between who we are and how we teach and lead. And for some people, it's either a reminder or epiphany. And we wanted to do this episode to really do some tangible ways to really invest in ourselves so that we can really do the work we're designed to do. So that's why you're here. And we wanted to talk about goal setting because it's something you and I have done for many years.
Yes.
And I know some of the people we work with have talked about that for their own lives.
Absolutely. It's a very common topic that I've spent the last 20 years talking about, William. So
well, that's why you're here.
Lots to say.
Okay. So my question to you to start off with is, from a teaching, leading, or serving perspective, right? Why, or from a well-being and positivity place,
Yep.
Why is having our own goals for people who are serving and helping the world, our own goals, so important?
Yeah, well, I think if we want to serve the world, we ideally need to be flourishing ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And there's around 40 years of research on goals and well-being. So there's so much research to show, and there are some perhaps disclaimers, or there are some specifics around goals and goal setting and goal striving that perhaps we can talk about today. So we know a lot about the types of goals, the motivation for our goals, and whether they positively impact our well-being or can have a negative effect on our well-being. We also know there's a wonderful book by Spencer Johnson, I think, called The Present. He's the fellow that wrote Who Moved My Cheese? You might probably remember that classic book. And it's called The Present. And in that book, he talks a lot about, if we're in the past all the time, we often talk about ruminating about all the not so good things that have happened, rather than reminiscing, is what we positively reminiscing we talk about on positive side. But he says, if we're in the future, we're often worrying about what's going to happen. And we know that ideally, also from mindfulness research, that we really need to be spending the majority of our time in the here and now, in the present. There will be times when we go to the past, there'll be times when we go to the present. But he says, unless you give your mind, or yourself, I guess, something around the future, because we're not clairvoyants, we don't know what's going to, we don't have crystal balls, we don't know what's going to happen. And so in that case, sometimes there can be a degree of uncertainty, clearly, but also anxiety. So if we give our brains something, so it might not be, and we'll talk about this today, too specific, but the benefit of giving our brains something about what we're desiring in the future can allow us to disengage from that and be more in the here and now as well. And they also give us a sense of meaning, because we'll hear again more about this today, particularly goals that are aligned to our values. So the values, our core values, are the things that matter most in our life. And when we're living in accordance with our values, that's where the well-being emanates. And we also know that goals that are aligned to our values are more likely to be attained as well. So it's giving us that sense of meaning and a sense of direction that for many people is missing, that sense of being directionless.
Especially when the profession is designed to help everybody else.
Yes.
Right? And so we're asking some questions about, where are you in this, right? And so the system's actually not designed for us to do that. So it can be disorienting for people, which really brings in the next question. And my question for you is, is there a right way and or wrong way to write our goals? I know you and I meet every year. We write our goals down. We talk them through. Sometimes I change. I'm like, I don't like the language of that, or da da da. Is there a right way or wrong way to write goals down for the year or for our life?
Yeah, and I think you'll possibly know this research better than me, William. But actually, let me take us back a step backwards. The late great Professor Anthony Grant, who created and started the field of coaching psychology, he used to say, "If it ain't written, it ain't coaching," and that's not good grammar. I know that.
It connects to how the science of learning, though, from an unleashed learning perspective as well. So
yeah, so we know that, if we write something down, we're more likely to actually action it. So that's really important. But I think, many people will be familiar with the acronym SMART, which is again based on 30 years of research. It's been around, I don't know, 20 years, a long time now. I think you can use that, particularly if you're new at goal setting. It can be a good framework to start to go from fuzzy, sort of a bit of an idea of what you want, to getting a bit more specific. But I do want to say, William, the further you go out into the future, the fuzzier you want it. So if you're in a shorter term, 3 months, 6 months, you and I set 12 months goals, you can be a little bit more specific, but you do want to hold some of these goals lightly, because if you're too focused, you won't see the potential opportunities that might emerge, which can happen because we're in we live in a system, and it's this concept of emergence that we can't always foresee what's going to emerge as all the variables shift and change.
We did an episode about emergence with Margaret Wheatley and how emergence actually happens, which also makes me think about how learning is unleashed, how it comes out of people and how that process. So I love the emergence, allowing emergence to happen. So you're talking about thinking about maybe 3 months, 9 months, 12 months. We do 12 months. One of the things we talk about, at Unleashed Learning, one of the things we do is we put the school or businesses put these success teams together. They decide who are those people who are going to bring out the best in each other to help create the change they're working on. But we also talk to the folks about who are people in your success team in your own life designed to bring out the best in you. I would say you're a member of my success team, Suzy.
Hey, and you're one of mine.
And so from a success team perspective, these people we turn to who want the best for us, who are trying to say, how far can you go? How do we support you? Where do goal settings come in? I mean, do we need people checking like we do? Like how, do we have those success team members or person check, or how do we do that to make sure they're actualized? Is it an individual process or is it a collective process?
I think it can be, I know for certain it's more powerful if you have an accountability buddy, whether you call them a coach or a success support person. I think absolutely, if you've got someone there is the accountability factor, which I think is one of the most important, because if like we met last week, if you're going to meet someone, I madly had my sheet out last week, checking out what I hadn't done, what did I still need to do. So accountability is really powerful. Just another quick example on that. For a year, we did email coaching. One of my girlfriends, who's also a colleague, she's a coaching psychologist as well. And every month, like we shared some goals over the year, and then every Monday we just send off a quick email of what actions we were going to take to progress those goals that week.
Love it.
And also, as we got the loop happening, what had we achieved the week before? And I have to tell you, William, it's dropped off a bit now, but I don't think I ever got as much done in that year as I had every Monday morning, the email accountability. So don't underestimate that. And also, we think about it from a positive psychology perspective, self-regulation is one of the most commonly occurring bottom strengths. So self-regulation is partly to do with our capacity to set a goal and stay on track with it. It also has to do with our emotional self-regulation, which can clearly impact on our overall self-regulation. So unless you're a highly self-regulated person, like my partner is, he's ex-military, unless you're really an outlier, most of us can really benefit from having assisted self-regulation. So assisted self-regulation can come in the form of an accountability buddy, a success support person, but it can also come in the form of formal coaching. Or yeah, the types I've just shared with you are probably what I would refer to as informal forms of coaching. So yes, so the accountability, the cheerleading,
That's
you know,
right.
because you do have to be careful who you share your goals with,
Yes.
because there will be people that it may impact on, because if you change, then there might be an impact on them, or it might highlight for them their own desires for change, or the fact that they haven't progressed their own goals or made changes in their life. So people can feel threatened sometimes, and they can sometimes consciously or even unconsciously undermine your success. So you want to be clear about who you have around you, but you definitely want the people that can say, "Come on, William,
Go for it. Go for it.
Look
Yeah,
at what you've achieved this year,"
yes.
and reminding people this is how we build hopeful narratives, which comes out of hope theory. And high hopers have high levels of goal attainment because they tell themselves the stories, the narratives of when they have overcome obstacles in the past and how they can do that again in the future. And I think thirdly, and I'm not sure what the research says about this, and this might be something you might comment on too, William, but it's like I bring my ideas, you bring yours, but we sort
Yes.
of get this collective, this sort of like I think sometimes it's referred to as a third mind. I heard someone refer to it. It's like these ideas that couldn't come alone, but together they emerge again.
So it's how, I mean, make two things it makes you think of is how, here's the science of how learning sticks. We say at Unleashed Learning, when you speak it, you learn it. So what happens is, I know when we have our coffees and we
Yes.
talk about the goals, it's forcing me to talk through,
Yes.
right? Which is what coaches, coaches do. But when we speak it, we learn it. The other thing is, as you know, we're trying to interrupt a delivery model of learning because that's just about filling people up, but how it's really co-created.
That's
So
it.
how learning sticks is when you and I have those conversations or in a classroom, or it co-creates. And so emergence can happen in a collective. So that's why you have to be really careful who's in that circle, right?
Absolutely.
And it's also why I'm thinking from a teaching or learning perspective, the ways we create positive communities working well together to create that kind of emergence. But that's literally the science of how learning sticks, is that interaction rather than just thinking about it.
Absolutely. But I guess one important consideration, which is sometimes hard for educators, and as you know, I've worked with educators for about 15 years now, is we're certainly not telling people what they should be doing.
No.
And even if we, I mean, because I think what's behind people telling, and particularly educators, myself included here too, is that you want the best for that person. So you can sometimes, I guess, inadvertently be giving advice or directions when we really, and there is a place for that, but ideally we want to be asking some really great questions that's going to illuminate some of the ideas or knowledge that that person already has. But yeah, there clearly is a space for sharing knowledge, but ideally you want to be drawing the knowledge out first.
I love that. It's like asking rather than telling.
That's
right,
it.
from a coaching perspective. Okay, we have two last questions, and this is, you alluded to this one. I think it's a really important. So where's the place of holding on tightly? So for example, one of my goals was to run that 10K run, and no matter what, I was going to run that 10K run. So that one was like, it is happening. But then there is the ones we hold lightly, or we kind of see where it's emerging. And I noticed that over the years, I'll look at my goals and go, after like the end of the year, that one wasn't really that important, or it emerged in a way I never would have expected. So my question to you is, how tightly do we hold on to what we've written down?
Yeah, I think this comes back to the time frame, especially if it's a longer term goal, because so many things can change into the longer term. The most important thing when we're looking at longer term goals, or they could be more desires or intentions. Again, there's a different, I guess, language that's used, is that you're really clear about the values that are driving those goals or those pathways. If we talk about hope theory again, we have all these multiple pathways that go into the future. As long as your values are being lived in the pathway, like through that pathway, then it wouldn't matter if that pathway became unavailable to you and because of it was outside of your control. So you didn't have control over it and you had to switch, disengage, put your energy into another pathway. As long as that still values congruent, the research overwhelmingly tells us you're still going to make progress towards your goals and you're still going to experience a well-being outcome there as well. But yeah, in the shorter term, I think, and something that's quite concrete that you have a high degree of control over,
Yes.
like running a half marathon, which I did too,
10K.
William.
I only did 10K just to,
10K.
yeah, 10K. I don't want to falsely state my goals.
Yeah, clearly you've got more control over that too. But I think it's an important consideration to think about the goals that you're setting. How much control have you got over them? Because you might not have 100% control over those goals. And in that case, I would say from a mental health and well-being perspective, it's going to be important from upfront to think about alternate pathways, so that if it, for some reason, let's say, for example, that 10K was cancelled, and you'd set it for a goal for the year, and you really wanted to be celebrating with a champagne with me at the end of the year. Right. And so you'd have a backup. So you'd have a plan B. You'd go, there's actually another 10K. It might be an hour out of town, but I really want to tell Suzy I've done it. So I'm going to go and do another 10K. So again, it's always good to have these plan B, C, and D. That's part of hope theory also.
The two things it makes me think of is educators and teachers and leaders I think of it as like they're planting these gardens and helping people's gardens grow, right? They're helping that. And so the goals are, what's my garden, if that analogy. And I always think about the goals as I'm planting seeds, tending to them, but I have to also be open to what actually emerges, because I might go, hey, it's even better than I thought, or it showed up in a way that I never imagined, or actually this is happening now. So I plant it, I tend it, I stay curious. There's things like, I want a tomato plant, right? The 10K. Yes. But I also want to see what's coming up here. And I think it's sometimes co-created. So I'm kind of watching, and, so that's my analogy of how I want to kind of hold on lightly and tightly sometimes.
Yeah. I've got two other points to make here, William. One is, I'm actually going through this as you're speaking. I'm thinking, this is sounding a bit relatable right now for me, because given the goals person that I am, I have a 10-year letter from the future, which is a fuzzy things that I want to happen. Then I have every year I have goals for the year. And then, I follow those up every week. I follow up on my goals. I think about what I want to achieve for the week. And then I have my daily goals, but I'm an outlier there. But I've got a couple of things that have just emerged, which was, one of them was sort of as a potential. The other one wasn't there at all. And at the same time, simultaneously, I'm thinking, can I still do the dream or the goal that I had and these, or is it going to mean that I'm going to have to adjust this other goal? And I'm only in the early stages of it, William, but I can already feel a bit of and I don't want to call it grief, because it's not like serious grief, but a bit of, I'm feeling the letting go. So I think it's probably normal that even if you have had a desire and intention, and then it doesn't turn out that way, to accept that there is going to be, and it's called, in William Bridges' transition model, he talks about endings and the grieving of the things that were, and then we often, ideally we want to sit in the neutral zone rather than rushing into something new. So I think be kind, that self-compassion, if there's something that you haven't had control of, or even it was an emergent thing that you didn't expect and it's amazing. Even if it's amazing, there still might be a bit of grieving around something that you thought might have happened. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think the revolution of this conversation, not from patting myself and yourself on the back, I'm just thinking in the context of teaching and learning, is that I talk about the flashlight analogy, like they're always, we're pointing our flashlights on everybody else. So you're somebody working with lots and lots of people to make a huge difference to the planet, and you are ensuring that your own life, it matters, right? Because what we learn from that process impacts how we're leading and teaching, what we write about, what we learn. So that what we're talking about, that key of educator, is essential to make learning stick for everyone. So that's pointing the flashlight and saying, who am I? And I'm also thinking of Parker Palmer, who I'm interviewing tomorrow. And he always talks about, we kind of demand to life, this is what I want, rather than what is calling my life.
Yes,
right
I love that.
What's calling my life right now? But we need spaces for that to happen, right?
We do, don't we? And that, that openness around it. The other thing I was going to say, because you made some reference to Sometimes you might set a goal and then you start pursuing it, and you realize it's not really the goal you want to pursue. We have there's a cycle of self-regulation that we refer to in coaching. And that is sort of, set a goal. There's clarifying what some of the irritations or concerns are, setting a goal, taking action. I mean, it's good old Kolb's learning cycle as well, reflecting, changing, doing more of what works and changing what doesn't. Now, through the goal striving process, I've seen it time and time again, having coached hundreds of individuals, that it's actually not until they're going through the goal striving process that they go, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And so on the cycle of self-regulation, there's an arrow, and I'd be happy to share an image of this if you like, William. There's an arrow that goes back to, right back to look at revisiting the goal again, because it's not until you go through the process that you have these, I guess, enlightenments in many ways.
It's how learning happens, actually. I think of how learning, we talk about circling back. And so part of that process, it's actually a learning structure as well.
Yes.
In some ways, it's that kind of reflective practice of learning and then seeing what's emerging from that process. I think it's fantastic. Yeah. Okay, last question. How do we make our goals stick?
Yeah. Well, I think the two things we have spoken about today that are key to goal success. And when I say goal success, it's not just attainment. For me, it's attainment and well-being. You want the well-being effect. So the first thing is that they are what we would call authentic goals, or in the research referred to as self-concordant goals. So that is goals that are aligned to our core values. So when I'm working with a coaching client, we actually, in an ideal scenario, would review the core values. And for some people, that takes quite a bit of time. Some people say they need a year, other people are pretty clear. But even if you just start to get a sense of what are, say, the top 5 core life values, and then we set the goals, and in SMART, on that SMART acronym, often people know the A as attractive or achievable. We've replaced that with authentic, which means it's my goal. It's not my partner's goal, my doctor's goal,
my family's goal, the society's goal, the business goal.
Because significant amounts of research to show that if it's not our goal, then there's low levels of goal attainment and low levels of well-being. That's not to say it might, say, for example, let's talk about in a school setting, perhaps your director of teaching and learning has said, this is the goal that we're working on collectively, or they might even go so far as to say, this is what I want you to, I mean, that's not an ideal coaching scenario, but let's say that you are given a target for the quarter or for the term. If you're sitting here going, if I had a choice, I wouldn't want to do that goal. If you don't really have a choice besides leaving the school, the opportunity there is to be creative. How can I possibly make this goal my goal?
Job crafting.
I've
been running a long time, Suzy. I know this stuff. It's also, if I might say, as we close this, is that I've said this to educators for years and years. I've been in classrooms and also in professional learning sessions and where maybe the teacher doesn't know all the strategies or but he or she wants to be there.
Yes.
You just feel it in the room. You want to make learning stick. There was a maths teacher once. I remember I didn't know most stuff about calculus, but it was like, God, I want to be in this room. He loves calculus. And then I've been in classrooms and also PD sessions and businesses where you could tell the chapter is closed for that person, but they don't want to leave because they're afraid or, but they're still there, and you could feel that too. So that authentic goals and being congruent and living a life of values is partly of the journey of what makes learning stick for everyone, right? It's part of that process.
And I mean, again, having worked with many teachers for many years, most of them will tell you and have told me that I came in to make a difference in a child or a student's life. But somewhere along the way, and understandably, I get this, you get sort of burnout or, disillusioned, tired. So there is an opportunity to revisit why did you come in, and how can you reconnect with that on a daily basis, despite all of the continuing challenges that educators face? Because unless you do withdraw, and you've chosen to stay there for another 5 or 10 years, then they're not doing this for you, you're doing this for the student.
Right.
because
And that's what we need, the success team as well. So I always say our success teams are often not inside the organizations, because sometimes there's just that collective think within the same place. So having those success team members from other locations is
Yes,
also very powerful in that journey. And it's okay when we don't want to be there anymore. It's
absolutely.
okay. Yeah.
It's absolutely, because there may be other ways that we find a sense of meaning and purpose in our lives. The main thing is that we have a sense of meaning, but for now it might be as an educator. Later on, it might be, I don't know, doing some other thing that's still helping people, grow
That's
and
right.
develop. So the other thing, William, I'd say is, I think that let's not underestimate the cheerleading. So finding someone that you do feel comfortable sharing your goals with, and that they really have your best intentions at heart, because they will, when the going gets tough, they will remind you of your why, and they will remind you of those hopeful narratives around, you can do it, you've done it before. I think inspiration too can come through primes. So we use a lot of primes in coaching. For me, that's lipstick on the mirror, but images, finding an image of that represents the goal, giving it a mission. So it could be mission marathon, William, for 2023. And I think, the other thing is, so often people move the goalposts, like they finish and they go, right, what's the next goal?
And they don't celebrate.
We do.
We do. We do.
So it's important to celebrate, not just for the fun and the joy of it, because it really helps you build a sense of competence, because you acknowledge what you did. And this also, we know from some of Dweck's research on growth mindset, that if we're really clear around what was the process that I took. So if we reflect back and we think about the things that we did well, we can replicate those things into the future and continue to build that growth and hopeful mindset going forward.
And be filled up to be of service if that's what we decide to do. I'll just end. I'm just thinking this because we were having our goal session maybe last week or the week before.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this for years and years, and I call them vision statements, and I had images. And when I was getting ready for our meeting, Suzy, I went back out, started looking through from like 2006 or whatever, and I printed it out, and I looked and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm actually living the life that I had talked about all those years. So it might not have been that year. And it also it looks a bit different than my brain had, but I looked, I go, that's actually the life I was talking about 10, 15, 20 years ago, whatever it was. So it may not be immediate, but at least there's a ambulance going by, but it was, those dreams were emerging and it had its own time.
That's it, William. And the other thing behind it, it's not The Secret, as you say, that it's attentional bias in psychology. We know that when we give something to our minds, if we write it out or share it with a colleague or create a vision board, then our brain then becomes attuned to look for opportunities, hear conversations that are going to connect into the goals and move us there. We also know, and I'm a big fan, and there's lots of research on visualization. So if you can use visualization, seeing yourself, good time to do it is the hypnagogic and the hypnopompic, which is just on waking, and hypnopompic's just on waking, hypnagogic's just on going to sleep. See yourself, in that situation, calm, confident, killing it, whatever it is. And then we also know another body of research is called unconscious goal pursuit. So they've done studies where they've got people to write their goals and think about them. Then they give them another task and they distract them with another task. And the brain is still working where you initially started to think about the goals. So don't think they fall away. The brain is still working on these goals. What we
focus on expands.
Yes, what we focus on grows. Exactly.
Yeah, it grows. Well, Suzy, I'm hoping for the people that are listening that it re-inspires them to invest in their own lives and in the pursuit of helping to make learning stick for everyone. So thank you so much for joining us, as always.
Thank you, William. And it's a joy to be here, and I'll be back, I hope.
Yes, you will. We'll talk to you soon, Suzy.
See you then.
Bye. Bye. So now it's your turn. We've got a question for you. And the question is this: what's one goal you've got for yourself this year? Now, some of the best conversations take place after the episode, so jump over there. And while you're there, grab one of our free new ebooks. So if you're in a business or a school, our ebooks are for you. And I'll look forward to seeing you next time.